All right, we're live, ladies. Let me get my screens right. Welcome back to Wind Down Wednesday, everyone. Oops, I am excited to be here tonight to have a conversation with these two beautiful ladies, Dr. Alicia Thomas and Dr. Tayler Ava Friar. Wait, you have your name here. Tayler Ava Friar. So both of these beautiful women live here in San Miguel. I've known Taylor for quite a few years. I recently met Alicia, and I'm super, super excited to have them here tonight to go over this topic of why are women leaving first as expats. We kind of lead I think we lead this movement, and this is just women in general, or we're motivating maybe partners and spouses to join us, right? For the ones that do and the ones that maybe don't. So I wanted to have those conversations that are with other people, other women, and just what their experiences are. And next week, I'm going to actually talk to men and find out what their reasons were for moving as well. So it's a two-part series. I hope you'll be able to join us for both things. And before we get into that, and also they will introduce themselves, but before we get into that, I wanted to, of course, talk about Michelle Watson and her yummy teas. This is a book that she sent to me about a week and a half ago. It's called Tea and the Black Woman. There are so many interesting things in here that are health related. So if you have not heard of her, please make sure you go to ingenuityspicecompany.com. I'll put the link, and make sure you order one of her yummy delicious teas or multiples. This one is the one that I'm drinking tonight, Tropical Island. It's delicious and it has very low caffeine content. So I'll drop her link in the chat for you. I appreciate her so much. And she's our official tea sponsor here at Casa Elm, okay? By the way, if we get cut off, it's because we're finally getting rain and there's thunder and lightning. So hopefully we don't get cut off here. I'm gonna put this in here. I'm probably gonna skip some of the normal things. As you know, I'm Michelle. I've lived in San Miguel de Allende. If this is your first time here, welcome. And if it's not, make sure that you subscribe. Make sure you hit the like button. Visit my website, which is Casa Elm. I am the founder of Casa Elm Boutique Guest House located in San Miguel. We've been here for over 3 years. I help people relocate, soft landing experiences, cultural experiences, or just a place to stay. It is one of the things that I very much enjoy doing. I love my job. I call it a job. I love my business. I love everything about it. And I think we can all that are here today relate to owning something, but working all the time maybe and just kind of doing our thing. So sometimes it does feel like a job itself, but I absolutely love what I do. So if you haven't visited my site, be sure to do so. Welcome, welcome, ladies. Shauna, Lee, Khadijah, Lisa, Tracy, Michelle. Hi. Yes. Okay. So I'm gonna just jump right into it because I'm afraid the power might go out. No more time. Okay. So I'm gonna let Dr. Alicia go ahead and introduce herself to us. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Go ahead. You're up next.
Everybody, Alicia Thomas. I am a recovering workaholic.
Can you, your volume a little bit louder?
Yes, can you hear that?
Yes, better.
Okay. As I was saying, I'm a recovering workaholic. I was a part of the rat race back in the United States, and ultimately, after a series of health scares, decided to get off of that hamster wheel. Um, Created my company almost a year ago, and decided to move to Mexico. So I own my own health consulting firm now, working with organizations in terms of very health. And I own my own time now.
Nice.
And I also have an 8-year-old daughter who joined me on the trip, and I'll say more about that later.
Okay. Thank you. And Taylor?
Hi, everyone.
Dr.
My
Taylor.
name is Dr. Tayler Ava Friar, and I am a lot of things, but primarily an art historian. I own an organization called Art Unknown, and we focus on Black voices in places you would not expect to find them. So, what that might look like is we understand what the diaspora looks like in places like Brazil or Serbia, but we know less about what Black voices look like in places like Japan or Mexico, for example. And so my work deals with a lot of that. I'm an author. I'm actually working on a book here in San Miguel right now. I have a TED Talk on this subject as well. And I'm recently a Fulbright scholar living here in San Miguel, living here in Paris.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit more about yourself, Dr. Thomas, and your move, where you moved from, how long maybe if you want to share you've been here in San Miguel.
So I'll start by saying I've been here since September, and so I guess that's rounding out 8 months now, which goes by quickly and slowly at the same time. But I'm hailing from North Carolina, which is where I was born and raised. Yet I was in the DC area for over 20 years, so I think DC is more home to me professionally, especially. But it was just important to me to find a place that I didn't feel like I couldn't breathe. And so a lot of my time in the work world was really being pressed to perform, excel, but not to be too much because then that's too much for the people you sometimes work around. And just not feeling like I own my time, constant deadlines, having a young child, essentially wanting to be present in her life and finding myself more often than not sitting in front of my computer while she's eating or as soon as she goes to bed and getting work done and then rinse and repeat starting again the next day and just not wanting to occupy that space. And ultimately, if you don't slow down, your body slows you down. As I said, a number of health related challenges, where luckily for me, having two Black females in my corner, my primary care physician, as well as my therapist, both were like, wait a minute. Something's going on here. And they were saying it slowly and gently, but it got more and more forceful until it got to the point where physically I could not do it anymore and had to take a break. And from that point on, the rediscovery period for me, being able to breathe and not necessarily have to constantly feel like I was a productivity piece in someone else's game, really changed the stakes for me. We'll probably get into it more, but joining groups on Facebook, Exodus Summit, and others that really opened my eyes to ways to live life that I hadn't necessarily, I would say I'd fathomed it, but I hadn't really considered it as a life that I could lead. And so being in a place and space where you're talking to and seeing people who are living the life that you think is kind of a fantasy, makes it real. And I slowly during that period when I was on leave started absorbing a lot of things and really thinking about the life I wanted for myself and my daughter. And that ultimately catapulted me, as I said, to leaving a job of a decade, starting my health consulting business, and ultimately, not necessarily on a lark, but considering international relocation because at that time I felt like I don't have to ask anyone for permission. I can be wherever I want to in the world. I can do the work that I do with my UX clients at any place. And so, after giving it some thought, lots of research, lots of trips to Mexico, ultimately I brought my daughter with me and she fell in love just like I did. And so we landed in San Miguel after a very hectic process of closing out a life, which is not easy at all. And getting here in September and beginning that process of just breathing, calming my nervous system, and recognizing that I could be my full self in any capacity and not necessarily tied to what I could do for someone. And so that's the large part of my story.
Do you feel that, and we'll get to you in a moment, Taylor, do you feel that so far, because you've been here now for close to a year, that this has been a decision that really, I mean, I know it takes time to settle because we have conversations about that all the time, that it's really kind of helped you pivot away from having the health issues and challenges and all the things to your nervous system?
100%. I think it's, you can't you can't put a price on good health and peace of mind. Um, but luckily, Mexico helps you in a lower price. And so that's always that benefit. But here, I don't necessarily feel, as I always say, keeping up with the Joneses, constantly going and buying things, doing things, almost to impress people who may or may not be looking, but feeling like at a certain status or stature with your company, things like that, that's what people expect of you. And for me here, I live very simply. We have a full, fully furnished apartment. I don't have to worry about those things. I get to get up in the day, get my daughter ready for school. Then I have my day afterwards because of the time she gets off from school. We have plenty of daylight hours for her to go to the park and enjoy life and do extracurriculars. And again, I'm not sitting there with my phone in my hand or my laptop in my lap, constantly looking at the next thing that's done. And so, it does a number. It really slows you down, and I can't really put that into words. It's a feeling. But you wake up one morning, you recognize you didn't gasp because you're like, wait, what did I forget to do? Or, oh gosh, these 10 things that I have, how am I going to prioritize them? The biggest things now are ultimately leaning into getting my daughter to and from school, and ultimately thinking about, okay, who are the clients that I'm working with today or tomorrow? But it's not this constant 8+ hour churn. And for me, that has been my waiting to exhale moment of being able to fully be present in where I am and not necessarily looking forward to the next thing and the next thing. And so that grounding, you feel it in your spirit, and you breathe deeper, you sleep better. Which we'll talk about teen perimenopause, so maybe not quite as deep as I want, but I can't imagine going through the stresses I'm going through in terms of that journey and then still being able to deal with all of the work challenges. So for me, I think in this 8 months, I've seen a dramatic shift. Blood pressure's down. Like I said, cycling thoughts, all of those things that really plagued me before. I'm at peace here. And again, there are constantly things that you can think about because that's life, but it's a much slower pace, and you find a welcoming community where people revere families and going out on Sundays to the parochia and just hanging out and not necessarily having a goal in mind all the time. And I love it.
That's awesome. I feel you in every aspect, especially being a single mom. It's just, it's a lot, and having that support definitely makes a big difference. Taylor, like, what do you think was the moment or experience that made you say it's time to leave? I know you've been traveling for a long, well, not traveling, you've been living abroad for a very long time. Maybe you want to share a little bit about that, and then your story of how you got to SMA.
Sure. Well, I have a different kind of story because I always knew that this is the life that I was going to be living, and I'm built for this life. I knew from a very young age that I was going to move abroad, and it was entrenched in me that way. My family history has made it so. My grandfather, for example, was a true Francophile, and he went to Paris every year for 30 years. And as I learn more about his generation, it makes perfect sense to me, right? Our grandparents' generation grew up and were working way before the civil rights movement. And in his case, the life abroad, in this case, France, was a migration that Black people were taking for a very long time to seek a better life. And it was really important to him that everyone in his life see it. So he had taken my mother, and after having a quadruple bypass surgery on his heart, I think it was 6 weeks later that he took my sister and I to Paris, and I was 9. And so that's the first place I ever went abroad. And it's interesting because you never know what's going to affect a child, because my sister was grumpy the entire time. But for me, it changed my worldview at a very young age. I saw the world differently, that there are people who live differently than me, and how fascinating that is. And over time, as I got older, I realized that if I really wanted to be an agent of change, I was very interested in international development at a young age, that I needed to understand and get to the heart of the matter of how different people live to connect with them better. So it affected what I studied in school. I studied international development for my bachelor's and master's, but I had always known that Once I got the opportunity, I was gonna go. And that's what I did. After I graduated college, I had to go back to my hometown, Oakland, California. I started working there. I started working at Google. And even though I was doing the job, my head was kind of out the window, thinking, okay, I'm going to stack my money. And when I get the chance, I'm heading out. And I was very clear about my goals from the beginning. And 3 years later, almost to the day, I left and moved to London. And that was the beginning of my life abroad. I've been living abroad 13 years now, and in some wonderful places around the world: London, Spain, South Africa, Serbia. I backpacked Southeast Asia. I lived in Vietnam, many, many places. But the difference is there's a difference between, or the distinction rather, is there's a difference between visiting a place and knowing a place. So for living abroad, the value for me was slow travel and living in places. I don't find it very compelling to be that person who lists the 100 countries that they went to, and there's no substance to it. I'd rather sit somewhere for 6 months or 9 months and tell you all about the food and all about the stories that I got to have there and the community that still misses me and is waiting for me there. So that was always my plan. However, just like for most people, when the pandemic happened, things changed for me, and my priorities changed as well. I was living in South Africa during the pandemic in Cape Town, and it became very difficult to stay there by the end. I was working full time at the United Nations. I was doing my PhD full time. It's not a great plan. And I ended up getting very sick by the end of it. So what I did was I went back to California once I was able to fly, and I had to kind of regroup. And quickly, what ended up happening was I knew that I wanted to be a lot closer to my family. Events like that make you rethink everything. And for me, being 2 days away from my family by flight hadn't bothered me before, but it now bothered me. So I decided to go on writing sabbatical. And um, my only goal in doing that was to find somewhere beautiful, quiet, where I could write and do some healing because a number had been done on me by that time. And so I thought I'd go to Mexico. I did not plan to come to San Miguel at all. In fact, I'd never even heard of it. I was on my way to Mexico City because it's one of the artistic capitals of the world, and I thought that would be the perfect place. However, Michelle knows this story very well, and it's a true story. 5 minutes, 5 minutes, no, 5 days before my trip to Mexico City, tickets booked, everything ready, I was in a cafe in Oakland, down the street from my house. And I remember it because we're still wearing masks. So I can only really see eyes. And I got into a conversation with a woman who was also waiting for her coffee. And somehow it came up that I was going to go to Mexico for the first time. And her eyes got really big. And she said, when I was your age, I went to a small town with jewel-colored cafes and fountains hidden behind double doors. And she said that there was a rose-colored church in the heart of the city with magic bells and all these artists. So can you imagine wearing a mask and you're just like listening to this? And I'm just like, well, that sounds great. That's the place. So she told me it was called San Miguel. I looked it up on Instagram. And I felt something. And after the pandemic, when you start to feel things again, especially if you've been through something, when you feel it. And I saw a photo of the parroquia, and I saw a photo of the murals in our biblioteca, our library. And I knew I was changing my plans. So 5 days before that trip, I changed my plans. I flew to Mexico City for one night, and I took the first bus out at 6 a.m. to come to San Miguel. And you will find, if you ever come to a place like San Miguel, that my story is like a snoozer because everyone has a magical story of living here. And that's why we come and that's why we stay.
Thank you. You know, I know this story, but I love hearing it. I love when you tell it again, you know, just the feeling behind it, because I think, like you said, a lot of us have had that feeling and is why we probably chose San Miguel as our place to be or be here, maybe not indefinitely for some, but definitely you know, I know that you've been coming back for years and doing kind of half a year and things like this, but we've had our population here that's grown so much over the last probably 5 years or so. And I think that that's something special. There's definitely a great energy in this town. It's so beautiful. Yes, sometimes people don't like that it's growing fast, but I feel that it's still very special compared to many other places in the world that I've visited. I love living here, so, and I love that you're here too, both of you. So thank you for sharing that. How do you think, or how did you feel you fit in terms of like your personal identity? I know that you've been here a little bit longer, Taylor, but okay, I'll tell my story because when I came, there weren't a lot of us in terms of us Black women. And this isn't just about Black women, it's just about women moving. But there weren't a lot of us here, living here. And in these past probably 5 to 7 years or so, there have been a lot more women coming. And I didn't really give a lot of thought to what my personal identity would look like in San Miguel. But did you all think about that at all? Or I know for Alicia, you were here, I think you came out to visit. Was that a concern? Was that something that, you know, you thought about, or it was just more about the town and how you felt in the town?
In every Facebook group that I have entered for a country, I generally look for the Black groups if they exist for that particular country. I recognize that those groups may not have all of the information you need about an area, and you do need diverse perspectives. But it's also important to me for people who look like me, who have perhaps some lived experiences similar to mine, to hear what their story is. How do they see this place through their lens? What are the highs, the lows, things in between? Because I think that's really important. Sometimes you get a very different perspective. For a lot of people, they think of San Miguel as like, oh, wasn't that former retiree place where all the old people who are a little lighter complexion go? And I was like, yes, but it has changed lots of families and things over time. And so if you get that perspective and you're looking at the place through their lens, a lot of the things that they're going to share are not things that may resonate with me. So that Black perspective is really important. I was really excited when we did come on our tour. And again, it was really important for me to have my daughter, because what I felt about a place, if I got here completely in love and she was like, this is the worst thing ever, then I'm in a place of conflict. And so having her with me, and when we came, it happened that we were coming at the end of the month. And we have monthly Black San Miguel group meetups. And so there was a brunch, and we literally had been there I think we landed the day before. And I was like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know these people, but we're going. And so, of course, my daughter's like, I'm sorry, we're going to see strangers. And I was like, we sure are. And it's going to be great. And so we went, and we were supposed to have gone to Shote, but we ended up going to like a brunch spot. And it was wonderful. Just a table full of women talking about what brought them there. Some were visiting, others were residents, and just generally hearing the wonders of a place that I had only been for a day. Gave me something. It gave me a starting platform, if you will. And from there, it helped me to say, okay, so I know that this is a good place for some. Now let's see if it's a good place for us. And it opened my aperture, I think, in terms of that perspective. But it always helps to circle back, because again, there are certain things that are unique to us in our community, that being able to put it out there and ask, does someone know this or that, or can you recommend, is really helpful. But it was less about how many Black people were in San Miguel, but what is a community? Because I've now found as a parent with a child in a school here, you make friends of every ethnicity. And that's important to us as well. I've always wanted my daughter to have well-rounded friendships, and to be able to learn not just the language, but cultures and things like that. And so I don't want to minimize the impact of just the culture of San Miguel itself. As Tayler said, this is a place that feels almost magical. It is real world, but it still has a magical element. And as I said, you slow down here, you really stop to smell the roses, if you will. And a lot of that is the community. When you go places, people smile at you. If you're asking something, and I'm still working on my Spanish, people will help and they're happy to do so. And the recognition is ultimately, are you trying? Are you trying to be a part of the community and not of the community? And so that's important, is that I get to live in places that have locals, expats, and others. And that changes the perspective. And I think ultimately it makes me and my child better, because I'm not hiding behind some expat enclave where it's just me and all of the people who speak English or whatever, but really being in the community. And more importantly, as I said, that diverse school setting that we're in, of her being in a school with expat. Sorry, the lighting is really loud. um, yes.
You're good. It's okay. I mean, I'm thundering, lightning, and it's raining like crazy. So I guess because Taylor was frozen. So hopefully we can stay on and you guys can continue hearing more of this. So we'll be here as long as we can.
But I think, while we're waiting for Taylor to get back, I think, again, getting back to the why, because I didn't necessarily delve into San Miguel itself. Similar to Taylor, I was interested in Mexico City, having lived, as I said, in the DC area for so long. I'm accustomed to big cities and action and options and things like that, and a lot of hustle and bustle. And so going to Mexico City was like, this is amazing. This is a city, granted on steroids, it's much bigger than most of the major cities we have, but there was something about it, again, just the sheer volume of things to do. But ultimately, I was looking for community. As I said, coming from the experiences of healing from work trauma, I wanted to be in a place where I felt cocooned. And there was something about San Miguel when you walk in, because it's such a smaller city, you're going to run into people in the local grocery stores or at the markets and things like that. So it's one of those places where you don't feel like you're a party of one. You're going to see people regularly, and not just at events, but you're going to be walking around. And for me, that was a bit of that small town feel that I grew up with. And it appealed to me. And I didn't recognize at the time that I got here or was considering getting here how much I needed it. But once I was here and recognizing community, people that will look out for you, like, hey, I didn't see you at such and such event or things like that, that means a lot. So yeah, I'm just grateful for that experience. And I'm not sure if I'm frozen or you may be, Michelle.